Countless believers face eternal separation from God each day without knowing the reason. There's a hidden fault that nearly all people make without realizing it, and it can lead to forever punishment. In this message, I'll tell you about an amazing experience where someone visited the place of punishment and got a clear warning from Christ about this mistake. My name is David, and faith has shaped my whole life. I grew up in a family where God came first in everything. We prayed when we woke up and before bed every single day. I always saw myself as a real believer, someone who followed the rules, went to worship on Sundays, and tried to live right. But honestly, I never paid much attention to certain teachings. For instance, I never really believed in Satan or the place of punishment. It seemed impossible that a loving God would let such a place of endless suffering exist. To me, these were just symbols, scary stories meant to frighten people who didn't have faith. I was sure my good life would get me into heaven. I never questioned this until that winter day. It was January 2019, just after New Year's. I remember the freezing wind and how the holiday decorations still lit up the streets. I was at a big shopping center buying last-minute gifts for my family. I'd picked out a nice journal for my cousin and a building toy set for my youngest nephew. I felt tired but happy, that special feeling that comes with giving gifts. After buying everything, I walked toward the parking garage below the mall. My arms were full of bags and I felt worn out, so I chose the elevator instead of taking the stairs. When I got in, nothing seemed wrong. It was a newer elevator with shiny metal walls and quiet music playing. 2 other people were with me. A man about 40 looking at his phone and a young lady wearing a blue coat. I pushed the button for the parking level and we started going down. But then I heard strange noises, creaking sounds like something was breaking, followed by a sudden shake. I didn't worry much about it. I'd always thought I wasn't afraid of small spaces. To me, fear of being trapped was just something that happened to other people. I felt the same way about panic attacks. I thought they were just excuses people made to get attention or something caused by too much medicine. I never thought I'd have one myself. The elevator stopped suddenly between floors. The lights stayed on, but we weren't moving anymore. I pressed the emergency button, but nothing happened right away. The man beside me got nervous and tried to use his phone, but there was no signal. A weird quiet filled the small space, broken only by my racing thoughts. This can't be serious, I told myself, but my heart started beating faster. Then it happened. The space around me, which had felt normal just moments before, began to feel like it was getting smaller. Not really, but that's how it felt. The walls seemed to be moving closer together. I couldn't breathe normally and started sweating. I couldn't believe it. Me, sweating, chest getting tight, hands shaking. I felt my heart pounding so hard it hurt. I leaned against the wall trying not to let anyone notice. The woman in the blue coat looked at me with worry. "Are you feeling okay?" she asked. I tried to smile, but it came out looking forced. "Yeah, I'm fine," I said in a rough voice. But I wasn't fine at all. My body was working against me. I couldn't breathe, my head was spinning, and I felt like I was falling into a deep hole. I tried to focus on something good, but fear had taken over. I saw myself in the shiny wall, pale face, wide eyes, hair wet with sweat. I tried to pray, but the words wouldn't come together in my mind. For the first time ever, the thought of having no control completely scared me. The 2 people in the elevator tried to help, but I couldn't speak. My body felt frozen, and then everything went black. I don't remember hearing anything else, just deep darkness that covered everything. It was like floating in empty space, in a place with no time or distance. Then suddenly, a light appeared far away. It wasn't normal light. It was white but seemed alive, moving and warm. It pulled me toward it, though I wasn't sure how I was moving. I felt myself being drawn to the light without fighting it. As I got closer, the light got brighter, and inside it, a shape began to form. I couldn't see the face clearly, but there was something familiar about this presence. It felt powerful, but also comforting. The fear I'd felt in the darkness slowly changed to curiosity. "David," the figure said with a deep but gentle voice. "It's time to see what you've always refused to believe." That voice went right through me, not just to my ears, but like every word entered my spirit. I felt sudden peace, but also growing worry. The feeling of being judged was coming, like a truth I couldn't ignore anymore. "You never believed in the place of punishment," the voice went on. "You always thought it was make-believe, a story to scare wrongdoers. Now I'll show you what you chose not to see. In a moment, everything around me changed. The light pulled back, and what was left was horror I could never have imagined. In front of me opened a deep pit. Flames as tall as mountains rose from the cracked, dark ground. The air was thick with smoke and ash, and the heat was overwhelming. The sky above was black with red streaks and lightning cutting through the darkness. But what really made me shake were the people I saw in the flames. Men and women surrounded by fire, screaming in pain. Their cries were heartbreaking, as if the hurt they felt would never end. Some reached upward like they were looking for a way out, but there was no hope in their eyes. Others curled up in themselves, eaten up by suffering I couldn't understand. But what shocked me most was recognizing some of them. They were believers, people I knew who had prayed with me, who had gone to church every Sunday. Among those suffering, souls were faces I knew, people who, like me, had believed they were saved. I saw church leaders, helpers, and people who had served the Christian community for years, all surrounded by flames, hands together as if they were still praying, but getting no answer. Why are they here? I asked with a shaking voice, unable to look away from that terrible scene. Because like them, they lived with too much pride, the figure answered. They prayed, but never truly opened their hearts. They judged others, thinking that their faith alone was enough to save them. But they ignored the sin that hid in their hearts. They lived believing God's forgiveness was automatic, never thinking about the cost of their pride. The words hit me hard. I felt like I'd been struck by a truth I'd never wanted to face. The prayers I'd said all my life, the things I'd done, everything now seemed empty, without real meaning. I'd always thought praying was enough to be forgiven, that simply believing guaranteed me a place in heaven. Yet the souls I saw in front of me were believers just like me, and now they were suffering forever. As I kept watching those hurt souls, I began to see scenes, as if part of me could see the sins they'd done when they were alive. Every believer in that place had lived thinking their sins were small and unimportant because their faith would save them anyway. One of them was a man I knew from church, a respected helper. Now I saw him kneeling in the flames, hands raised in desperate prayer. He had lived a faithful life. Yes, but in his heart he had always judged others, thinking he was better because he followed the rules perfectly. But he had never shown true kindness or mercy. He had condemned people who didn't meet his standards, forgetting the humbleness that God requires. Another was a woman I knew. She went to church every Sunday and prayed loudly, but behind that faithful appearance was a life of fakeness. She had hurt others for personal gain, convinced that simply asking for forgiveness had cleared her. But in her heart, there was no real sorrow, only fear of punishment. And so, one by one, I saw believers who, like me, had thought they were saved simply by their faith, ignoring the true meaning of God's love and justice. The images unfolding in front of me were so clear and raw that I felt overwhelmed. Every soul I saw suffering in the flames had lived as a believer. They prayed, read the Bible, went to services, but always lacked something that condemned them. Saying prayers and going to church isn't enough, the figure beside me said. Many of those you see here lived thinking that simply showing faith to others would guarantee their salvation. But faith is not just words or outside actions. It's a daily action of the heart, living according to the love I have taught, and also according to justice. The voice was full of compassion but also undeniable strength, as if giving me a lesson I could no longer ignore. But how is this possible? These people had faith. They were devoted believers, I said, still unable to fully understand what I was seeing. How can they be here? I didn't think believers could be here. Why are they here? Because they neglected what's most important. True sorrow for their sins and humbleness, God replied. Pride blinded them. They never truly confessed their sins in their hearts. They never gave up the pride that made them feel better than others. They prayed, yes, but not sincerely. They prayed to be seen, to feel righteous, but inside they never let my love change their souls. I felt a wave of panic wash over me. If these people ended up in punishment, what chance did I have? I had lived like them, certain that my prayers and faith were enough to save me. I had done exactly what I now saw in them, judged, ignored my flaws, and taken for granted that God would forgive me anyway. The screams of the condemned pierced my heart. I looked at their faces twisted with pain, looking for signs of hope, but there was none. They were trapped in endless suffering. The flames didn't destroy their bodies or turn them to ash. Instead, they seemed to continue their suffering forever. At one point, I noticed a particular man. I knew him well. He had been a preacher, one of those who always spoke passionately about God's love. He had led countless people to faith. Yet now he was there among the flames, with a look of endless horror on his face. I remembered how in life he bragged about his good works and how much praise he got from his church members. Him too, I whispered. Yes, him too, the voice replied. Because despite his good deeds, there was no humbleness in his heart. He preached love, but lived in judgment. He silently condemned those who didn't follow his example, thinking himself better than others. He didn't seek my forgiveness, only the satisfaction that came from people's praise. The words hit me like a whip. How many times had I silently judged others, thinking myself better because I prayed every day, because I followed God's law as I understood it? How many times had I looked at others with contempt, convinced that my faith was purer than theirs? I kept walking among those suffering souls, unable to look away. I saw faces that had lived in wealth, who had used faith as a mask to hide their sins. Some were religious leaders, others ordinary people, but all had made the same mistake. They had fallen asleep in the false security of their faith, thinking that believing was enough to be saved. Pride is poison for the soul, God said, interrupting my thoughts. Many believers have fallen into this trap, thinking that their faith made them immune to judgment. But I see the heart, and a proud heart cannot approach me. I was shaken. I felt like every word was directed at me. I had always been sure that my devotion was sincere, but now I began to wonder if I too lived in the trap God was talking about. But how can I avoid falling into this temptation? How can I be sure I don't live in pride? I asked with a trembling voice. God remained quiet for a moment, as if giving me time to truly think about that question. Humbleness is the key, David. The humbleness to recognize that you are imperfect, that you need my forgiveness every day, not just with words, but with your heart. The humbleness to not consider yourself better than anyone, to not judge others, but to love them as I have taught you. And above all, to live with the constant awareness that you might not be worthy of my judgment, because no one is. No man, no matter how devoted, can save himself alone. I felt tears filling my eyes. The idea of living with the awareness of always being on the edge between salvation and damnation terrified me. But at the same time, it made me realize how blind I had been until that moment. I had lived without ever truly questioning, without ever doubting that my faith was enough. Then God guided me to another part of the place of punishment. Here the fire didn't burn visibly like in the area I had just left. It was thinner, more hidden, but the pain was equally exhausting. This place was reserved for believers who had lived with false confidence and arrogance, thinking that their faith made them better than others. It was a different kind of punishment, suffering not only physical, but also spiritual. Here I saw people forced to constantly relive their lives, every action, every thought. Their punishment was constant awareness of the opportunities they had to truly repent, but had wasted. Every believer in this place lived with the eternal awareness of how close they were to salvation, but had drifted away because of their pride. Their screams were not only of physical pain, but of deep spiritual agony, a remorse that ate them from within. I saw desperate people trying to repent, but it was too late. Repentance was no longer valid. Judgment had been passed, and now they were condemned to eternal suffering. One of them, an old man, looked me in the eyes as I approached. "I was like you," he said with a voice broken by suffering. "I thought I was saved. I thought my faith was enough. But I judged. I lived thinking I was better than others, and now I am here." I couldn't bear his look. It was full of regret, a regret I knew was eternal. But what terrified me most was the similarity between his story and mine. How many believers, I wondered, were condemned to this place because they lived in false confidence, thinking they never had to face the possibility of punishment. The divine figure beside me looked at me. "Do you understand now, David? Do you see why the place of punishment is not just for open sinners? Many believers end up here, not because they didn't pray, not because they didn't believe, but because they never truly abandoned the pride in their hearts. They thought their faith would save them automatically, without doing the true spiritual work of transforming their souls. Those words burned inside me. I felt like everything I had always believed in had crumbled. I had prayed. I had lived a Christian life. Yet now I understood that I had always neglected something fundamental: humbleness. I had never truly understood what it meant to be humble before God. But there is still hope for you, David, God said gently, breaking the silence that had surrounded my thoughts. You are here to learn, to understand what many ignore until it's too late. I brought you here not to condemn you, but to give you a second chance. In an instant, the world I knew disappeared. I found myself in a place of peace, a space that seemed outside of time and distance. It was as if everything was finally in its right place, everything created with perfect sense. There were no problems, no pains, no burdens to carry. Everything I had endured over the years, all the disappointments, the sorrows, the regrets, seemed to dissolve in an embrace of absolute calm. It was a harmonious world, made just for me, a place where every detail was shaped with divine care. I couldn't clearly see what was around me, but I knew everything had meaning. Then I saw him. Jesus was in front of me. His presence was bright, full of love and understanding. There was no judgment in his eyes, only deep awareness and sweetness. He looked at me and with a voice full of grace said, "This journey has been a lesson for you. Everything you have experienced, everything you are now witnessing, is already written in the Bible. But over time, many have stopped believing. Faith has weakened, and in the last 20 years, indifference has grown. However, everything I have revealed through the scriptures remains true, and you are now a witness to it." His words touched me deeply. They were sweet, but also full of truth. I didn't feel condemned, even though in my heart I knew I had made mistakes. It was as if everything he said shed light on parts of me that I had ignored. I felt small but at the same time loved like never before. Then Jesus added, "I must show you one last thing." Images appeared before me as if shown on an invisible screen. They were moments from my life, instances I had almost forgotten. In each scene, I recognized myself and saw myself fail. There was an elderly woman on the street whose shopping bag had broken. I passed her by without stopping, too focused on my own business. Then there was a crowded bus. A pregnant woman was standing near me, visibly tired, and I pretended not to notice her discomfort. Scene after scene, Jesus showed me other situations where I had chosen indifference over love. Each image was a dagger to the heart. I felt small, weak, and above all, deeply guilty. Jesus calmly explained to me, "These moments are not just missed acts. They are the opportunities where I approach you. I send signals, create occasions for you to grow, to love." Faith is not just going to church every Sunday or reciting prayers out of habit. Faith is something greater. It is living in love for others. Every time you choose to do good, your soul is strengthened. But when you turn away from others' pain, it darkens. I see people's hearts. I see what truly drives them. Then he looked at me with infinite tenderness and added, "I know you have a great heart, David. That's why I ask you to carry this message to others. I don't want anyone to forget what you have seen and heard. The place of punishment is not just a symbol. Evil truly exists, but you have been created free. You have the power to choose good and avoid it. Every act of love, no matter how small, brings your spirit closer to eternal light. And I assure you that if you choose good, you will find peace forever." His words were like healing for the soul. I felt the weight of my mistakes, but for the first time I understood the true meaning of faith. It wasn't a ritual or a duty, but a journey of love toward others and toward God, a journey I was determined to undertake and share with others. Then everything vanished. I don't know what happened to my body from the blocked elevator to the moment I woke up in the hospital. It was like a total blackout, a void I can't explain. But I know for certain what happened to my soul. When I opened my eyes, I was lying in a hospital bed. The steady sound of machines monitoring my heart and breathing filled the room. My hands were trembling, my body tired, drained of all energy. I was alive, but in that moment I felt different. Next to me was my wife, her eyes swollen with tears, her face marked by worry and relief. She took my hand and told me the doctors had saved me. But deep inside, I knew there was something greater at work. God had granted me a second chance. I hadn't simply regained my body. Something inside me had changed profoundly. I had always been overconfident, thinking I knew what was right, believing that my surface-level faith was enough to protect me. But what I had seen and heard had shaken me. I knew I had been close to damnation, not the symbolic one we often imagine, but a reality as concrete as it was terrible. And perhaps even more importantly, I had learned something I had always ignored. Panic attacks are real. They are not exaggerations or weaknesses. When you experience them, you feel like the world is crumbling around you, that you are losing control of everything, even your breath. Now I understand how important it is to respect those who suffer from them. No one should be judged for something so devastating and unpredictable. As I lay in that bed, weak but alive, I felt a profound sense of gratitude but also responsibility. I knew my soul could no longer remain the same as before. I had lived for years with a comfortable faith made of habit, empty gestures, and pride that made me feel immune to judgment. Now I understood that simply calling oneself a believer wasn't enough. Mechanical prayers or Sunday church visits were not sufficient. I had to change. Every prayer had to become an act of true connection, a moment of sincere confrontation with myself. Every day had to be lived with humbleness, trying to look at my sins without justifying or ignoring them. I learned that faith is not a certainty to be carried with pride, but a journey, a conscious choice that requires courage, dedication, and above all, love for others. Today I live with a different awareness. I know I will never be perfect, but I have understood that salvation does not come from being flawless. It comes from recognizing one's own mistakes, striving to do good even in small things, and never turning away from those in need. God showed me that living with faith means embracing humbleness, accepting one's own fragility, and seeking to improve one step at a time. My soul has changed, and with it, my way of living each and every day. The place of punishment is real, and it is a place where many believers like me have ended up because they ignored the truth about what it truly means to be devoted. This is the truth I want everyone to know. The sin of pride can lead believers to punishment as well. Evil truly exists, and so does Satan. Do not ignore this lesson. Repent sincerely every day and live with humbleness before God. Only then can we hope to avoid the fate I have seen with my own eyes. I would like to end by saying this phrase that is carved in my mind, but I don't remember where I might have read it. The greatest trick Satan can do is to make people believe that he does not exist. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for reaching the end of this story. Your presence here is important and fills me with gratitude. I invite you to write in the comments where you are listening from. Knowing that you are here from all over the world makes me feel part of a community united by faith and hope. If this testimony has touched your heart, I ask you not to keep it to yourself. Share it with friends, family, and anyone you think might find inspiration in it. By sharing this message, you too can become messengers of Jesus' love, instruments of light and hope in a world that needs it so much. Every small gesture counts, and together we can plant faith and compassion wherever we go. God bless you and always be with you.